We're moving on to the practical application of what you learned yesterday. They gave you a very good overview of soils and water in Afghanistan. I know you remember there's different soil textures like clays and sand and loams, filtration rates, as well as what are the two basic types of irrigation systems they have? Basin and furrow, right? Those are the main ones. So this session is really more about the theme of awareness raising. I think Dig will explain to you that the systems of basin and furrow they're very comfortable with, they can do with their hand tools, and so there's probably not a lot we can do to improve it. But it's really to make you more aware of the environment you're going to be working in, the systems they're working on. And as one guy said, okay, now when I see an Afghan at midnight with a shovel out in this field, he could just be farming. So I think you all know what I mean. But that's going to, of course, be your judgment. But he said that's just one more thing I need to think about, that he could actually be just farming and that's it, not up to anything else. So again, we have Dig with us, and then we have Patrick Barnes. Patrick is a research associate here at Fresno State, and Patrick will be handling the soils aspect, and Dig will be handling the irrigation. So why don't we divide them in two? And the first group will go with Dig, the second group will be with Patrick, and then we'll switch. So let's just take 1, 2, 3.
Again, welcome to the real part of the session we had yesterday, right? This side we're going to have some hands-on demo to show some of the things that we talked about in our slides. And if you remember, we had the irrigation and then the soils. So what we're going to cover here now is the irrigation part, and then when we switch group, we'll go back to the soil and then go back and forth. And from some of the presentation slides you saw yesterday, if you remember, we talked about flood basin. Remember, those are like, but I showed you a picture of a much larger area. We would love to have you guys do a larger area here, but because of shortage of time, we will minimize it, but at the same time, try to get the information we are trying to work with. So if you recollect, this is a typical example of a flood basin. But do you think something is wrong with this one right now? Like the first shot that you see. Okay, but the other problem is, remember I said you won't use flood basins to grow vegetables and stuff, right? And you see tomatoes growing here. It's just that these two sets were created last time when we had the group, and our students said, it's well prepared, why let it go to waste? So they went ahead and put some seeds. So you have the tomatoes, but ideally, in a flood basin, you won't see normally vegetables growing. Okay, you'll see something like wheat or stuff like that. But this would be a normal scenario. You'll see these. This is flood basin, right? Mm-hmm. And this is the bed and the furrow system. Here, as you realized from the slides yesterday, that it needs to be relatively flat and even. And somebody already pointed out that it already looks flat. But again, remember, it's a much smaller area. It's easier for us to eyeball and say it looks flat enough. But if I give you this whole area, would it be easier for you to guess if it's even enough? Most likely not, right? So this is the bed and furrow. This is your flood basin. So what we need to do right now as a group is we are going to recreate these two right over here. Okay, so with that, let's get some workout and get our hands dirty. And just to make it easy, who is the senior most ranking officer here? Because we need a team lead.
I'll do it.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay, so what we're going to do is this area that we have behind us, right behind us here, is what we're going to try to replicate this. So we're going to create one small flood basin here, and then on this side we'll create, you don't have to create 3 beds. Even if you create 2 beds, that should be more than sufficient, but we need to recreate this over here. And the idea of doing this exercise is it gives you a feel for, I mean, it's easy to look at it and say, oh, no big deal, it's very easy to do it, right? But when you do it hands-on, it gives you another perspective on what goes through their mind when they're working with it. And the other beauty is, I call these, luxury, because to have shovels with handles that's, neatly manicured or, smoothed out, or even have some fiberglass one is almost like a luxury. What kind of shovels and hand tools they normally use? Most of the shovels that they have won't be something like this. That's something that's made in the local smith shop, and they might have a piece of poplar that have cut through to make something like this. So with that, you said you'll be the team lead. So I will let you lead the team, in making the flood basin here and a bed furrow system on the other side, and we can split it into two groups, one that can work on the flood basin. Actually, let's split it into three groups. We have 9, right? Yeah. And I'll tell you why. We have the flood basin and the bed and furrow system, right? But we need water to test it, correct? And we need to make the water come to our small little farm over here. Our source of water is right over there, that piece of pipe that you see with that spout in there. We have to just recreate and emulate that, right? So what I want one group to do is seal that off, create a small channel or a canal kind of a thing to bring it over here, so that when we're ready, when we turn that water loose, we have the water coming in here and we can let the water loose into our small floods. So one group can work in creating this ditch or canal. One group can work with creating the bed.
You guys do the basin, and then if you two could work in irrigation, and the rest of us will
the furrows, yeah. And then feel free to, if you have to move the dirt around here.
So wait, where's the edge of ours? Right here?
Okay.
It's too high or is it good? Yesterday.
So one way is this way. I mean, if you don't have those nice ADAP type tools, what I like to do is just hold the rake parallel and just rake across, and that's one way to even it out. What about another way? What's another way do you think you can check?
Put water in it?
Water down.
Right down and see where the gaps are.
Yeah. So you look down, and you can see we still have a little bit of work here to do.
And which side do you think we need the slope towards? We need some slope to it. So your water should be there.
We're going to drain it out, right? You can.
Yeah, push. Blend. If I'm in an area like Kandahar where we have a problem with salt, right? And one of the solutions in salt management was to plant your seedlings or the plants in a certain area of the bed. What is that be? Am I going to plant right in the middle, or am I going to plant in the edge with the salty water?
Close to the water because the farther away the
Yeah, if you're closer to the water, it's going to help you dilute some of the salt in there. So you will plant mostly on the edge. But again, you have to remember, if you're going to plant towards the edge, mostly we make the bed wide enough so you can fit 2 plants on either edge. Either we can block it off over there, let the channel fill off properly so we have a proper head, then we see the water movement properly, or we just let it open, and as the water fills up, it'll just slowly trickle in. But it's easier to see the effect if we have that blocked off. Let the water collect on your...
block off both.
Yeah, block up both. Okay. Maybe just temporarily, we'll open it up. That way it gives us enough time to...
better effective way to water.
Effective way, and also you'll be able to see, because otherwise it's going to just trickle through with a very low volume. We won't be able to see where the faults are.
Nice.
Plus, and remember one of the slides I showed, I said the farmer had to break his whole field into smaller checks. Imagine this scenario, if I have even just this area and this water is trickling at this rate, is it easier for me to break it into smaller checks so the water moves faster rather than just a little bit of water going everywhere? It's going to take forever.
I don't know if you explained, but the last session we did the basin and the furrow here, and then planted tomatoes. So this is what when the plants are in there, that's what the basin looks like, and the furrow.
Yeah, and then I also pointed out to them that ideally they won't see tomatoes being planted in a basin. Most likely they will see wheat or clover or something like that. But okay, does it look like we have enough head in the water to let this one loose? Who wants to be the Mirabel? Go ahead. Let it open slowly. If the gust of water is too high, then you'll have a lot of erosion as well in the seed movement in general.
Better, good.
is, right? So pretty straightforward. Somebody wants to go ahead and block this one off.
So what's the most important tool an Afghan have? Shovel.
The slow percolation through in the small area, so you didn't see the effect of, you know, not having a slope when the water moved in. But if the volume is really low, you'll be able to see that the water is fighting to go uphill and fall into the lows and high spots. So now that you saw how the water movement is here, feel free to open the other one and let's see how the water movement is. Should have enough water in there too. Did a pretty good job. Water moved where we wanted it to, right? Now, here is my question. Is it just enough for you to see that, you know, water moved everywhere and we say, okay, that's it, done. You know, we have put enough water. Say, for example, now I see water everywhere. If I close it off over there, is it going to be sufficient? Because what are you trying to do with this water in the furrow? Is to move this water into the beds, you know, from underneath and go in there. So based on the growth stage of your plant, what the water uptake they're needing for, what the size of the beds you're working with, it's just not visually enough to say, okay, I have water in there, that should be enough. Because you need to have enough water in there in terms of the volume. The reason I say this is because sometimes what people will do is they'll make these furrows really shallow and skinny. So you'll see some water in there, but it might not hold enough water for you to wet up this area that you're working with. Does it make sense? Okay, so now that we have seen both the bed and the furrow system, what are some of the things we have learned from this exercise?
Shovels are nice.
Yeah.
Build your furrows deep, high.
Yeah.
Level off.
Level off. But again, with something like this, and again, I mean, one system cannot be exchanged for other, but for something like this, you can still go ahead and mess with your, you know, field if the water level is not working, if there's highs and low spots. But for something like that, once you have put your seeds in there, you don't want to be going in there and raking up the spot and say, this is my high and this is my low. That's one. Number two, what are some of the things you have to be careful when you open the water? Doesn't go in too fast. If it goes in too fast, what can happen? Erosion, and the seeds go away.
Seeds, fertilizers, everything.
And then that's one thing you'll see a lot in flood basins, not this small, but when you go in a bigger field, when they're growing wheat or corn, when you stand on the side and look at it, you'll see it looks wavy. Normally, that wavy nature that you see is normally, in most cases, a function of water, because some areas are getting less water, some are getting more, and wherever there is more water, there is more nutrients. Wherever there is less water, maybe there is not enough nutrients going in there. And then also, with the erosion that we talked about, especially in the beginning, you have to be careful, because if all the seeds get moved, where it's going to go? To your slope and the tail end, right? You'll have overpopulated growth of wheat or clover that you're trying to grow in one area versus the other area going to look really scattered and then really sparse. So again, looks simple, but then when you talk to them or engage with them, once you have seen it, you know, once or twice, it brings a, you know, different thought process in your head as to what are the questions you need to ask or what you're going to talk to them about. Because again, I think one of the key process when you're going out there is to be able to somehow engage with them. If you know a little bit about what they're doing, you can just go and engage rather than just go and stand there and say, okay, what am I supposed to ask him? It's almost like, you know, this exercise can be almost something like break the ice, right? When you're meeting somebody for the first time, you need some conversation point or something to talk about. So this is a good starting point. Plus, it gives you a, you know, idea on how you can work with them and making it better. It's not that they don't understand, but sometimes it needs to be pointed out in certain ways.
And again, just for your own security, sometimes you'll understand again that what they're doing out there, especially at night or so. Because as we learned, maybe their water schedule is at midnight. That's just how the Mirab, you know, had it scheduled. So you'll just be more aware of what exactly they are doing, or at least with the farming side.
Again, like as I said yesterday, the most irrigation practices or most practices over there is not based on the premise that it's on demand. And you know what I mean by on demand, right? When you need water, water is there. When you need fertilizer, fertilizer is there. Nothing is on demand. It's basically based on when can I have access to it and how best I can use it. So I think with that, if you guys do not have any question, we're going to switch groups.